Welcome to Prime Suspects. Alongside Adam Bjorn and Prime Sports co-founder Joe Brennan Jr., I'm your host, Matt Landis. Adam, the stage is set for the World Cup semifinals. How were the handle and results for the quarterfinals, including France over Morocco, Spain over Belgium, England over Norway, and the team you can't get rid of, Argentina over Switzerland?
Well, as expected, France started out with 90% of the money on them. They did the job pretty easily, but followed up 90+% money on them. I mean, goalkeeper mistakes in this thing is just getting tiring, especially late or early in extra time. The amount of near misses we've had has just been extraordinary through this entire thing. Then finally, some draws showed up. England, Norway, great one. Fortunately, that didn't get to penalties. They gave it up pretty quickly. And then thankfully, Switzerland got the equalizer, and then also held on with 10 men for a period of time. While there was a ton of money coming into that draw after the England game, it still ended up the right result. Because when you get that back and forth, you get people sort of laying on the favorites. And once Argentina scored, people just got on and expected that to just cruise on, just like they did with Cape Verde. So they ended up decent results in the end. And I think first time ever, or first time in a long time, the top four seeds have gotten through to this stage, which ultimately, you would think, okay, it was a very boring kind of journey to this. Very much not the case of this, but still cream rose to the top.
And Joe, to that end, what were your top takeaways from the quarterfinals?
Well, now we've got the chalkiest semifinals in like recent history. Seems like things were kind of headed this way. One of the interesting takeaways I have, and just like looking at the response online on like social, and I don't know if it's because it's the world's game, but there seems to be some responses, or there seems to be a lack of response like you would have for like the NFL and the NBA and certain American sports. Yeah, in the England-Norway game with the ball hitting the overhead cable, something like that, with the Swiss getting the red card in extra time, things like that. There didn't seem to be the wave of demands for refunds by World Cup bettors that we would normally see if something like that happened late in the game. One thing you did see, though, was the Norwegian guy, Sorloth, who did not give up the ball. The Holland there at the end, he seems to be getting the kind of level of abuse on social media that you would expect for somebody who crippled a bunch of SGPs here in the US. But amazingly, most of that just seems to be that this was the worst moment in Norwegian history, and not people bitching and moaning about missing out on the fifth leg of their parlay. So I don't know, maybe the world's game's fans, and more importantly, the world's game's bettors seem to be handling this in a much more mature way with some of these results, but I'm unsurprised by them. I mean, at Argentina, God, they really are floating on air and refereeing right now. They just seem to be willed by FIFA into the final. It's going to be actually kind of interesting seeing England and Argentina go at it here in their semifinal. I don't imagine there's going to be the kind of fireworks between France and Spain. Like, what are they going to do? Like, argue over who owns the Pyrenees here? But when you come down to it, there's not a single team here in the Final Four that I think is incapable of winning the World Cup. Although Thomas Tuchel seems to really think that England is just getting by on luck right now rather than the quality of the game. So maybe they're the shortest of the four that are left in the Final Four. But I still like what I was saying a couple of days ago. Spain just seems to be cruising in here at low altitude for a team that was a co-favorite before the tournament. And practically nobody is talking about them. They're talking about the other three teams.
Yeah, a lot of what I've been hearing is that they're not playing the most exciting brand of soccer necessarily, but it's been a winning brand up to this point. We'll see how that fares for them as we enter the semifinals. But first, we will pivot because the World Cup wasn't the only weekend event generating significant interest, with Conor McGregor's comeback making UFC 329 the most bet MMA event in history, at least for BetMGM, where 88% of bets and 81% of handle backed McGregor as an underdog. Guys, those hopes lasted about as long as USA's 1-1 tie with Belgium last week, with McGregor being TKO'd 69 seconds into his return. Adam, that result sounds like a windfall for recreational books. How was it for Prime Sports and BetCris?
I mean, for MGM to say that, they mustn't write much action on UFC. Yeah, the volume was good, but I don't know about in history. I mean, there's been some pretty bloody big fights in the course of the last
Yeah.
couple of decades. But in the end, we needed Holloway. There was some master action on McGregor, but overall, yeah, there was a lot of money on McGregor. The price went, I think it was as high as 3-1. It went as low as plus 180, and then sort of headed back to 270. And then by fight time, it was back around plus 220. So it was all over the place collectively. Absolute disgrace. He needs to never get in the octagon again. I'm seeing footage now of sort of pre-fight as he was getting ready to come in that he seemed to be hobbling and checking that leg as well. So I know Holloway kind of tried to get the crowd pumping, sort of saying, he's the champ, giving credit to Conor for the career he's had, and it sort of fell on deaf ears pretty quickly. So I think between that and then that women's fight we had a few weeks ago, sort of trying to bring these old people back together, what we saw at the lawns of the White House and things like that, I think MMA, UFC collectively is starting to struggle a little bit on keeping their credibility of some of these high gauge fights that they've had for such a long time. In the end, surprise, I don't know. It just turned into a complete dud after there were some decent fights on the undercard. So it goes. But yeah, he should never get in that ring again. No one should ever pay a dime again. It was funny. I saw one comment about someone saying they pirated the fight and they still wanted a refund afterwards. So pretty disappointing and unfortunate.
Joe, Adam touched on some decent fights on the undercard at least. So from the undercard to the main event, what did you make of UFC 329?
Well, it is interesting that a 69-second TKO wasn't even the quickest decision of the night. Paddy Pimblett got the 40 seconds and got a submission. That's pretty hardcore. But this was the shittiest product that they could possibly have put out there. I am stunned to hear Adam say that Masters action came in on McGregor. It must have been because McGregor was priced. I mean, what was McGregor priced at on the money line right before fight time? Like, I mean, my kid was calling me from Chicago. He's like plus 500 something. Like, if you're gonna go and you're gonna take a flyer at it, like you want to buy a lottery ticket on that guy, fine. Anybody who knows fighting, the guy hadn't fought 5 years. Oh, he may have had some, middling results, but he had some serious results against some serious competition here in recent months and recent years. While the other guy was getting soft on cocaine, Irish whiskey, and his fucking attitude. I think Conor McGregor's a goddamn disgrace. 5 years, he should have given up about 8 years ago. He's been getting his ass whooped for quite a long time. And I just can't believe that the public still backs him. But to hear that some Masters money was flowing in on him, I guess it's just opportunism, But I think Adam's right. UFC better take a step back. I think they're trying to put too much product out there right now. The fight qualities are low. This is like the third or fourth broadcast they've had in a row where the fights were just shit. And, I don't know. Maybe it's the terms of that Paramount Plus deal that they have in order to make it work. It's going to be a volume rather than a quality play. And then also, I mean, all conspiracy theories aside, it was clear, as somebody who suffered multiple knee injuries and meniscus tears and things like that, McGregor couldn't stand on one foot. The fact that he got out there on one leg for 69 seconds against a human lawnmower to collect his check makes you ask, well, what would you do? Like, if you were standing on a torn up knee, would you stand on it for 69 seconds to let a human pile driver kick the shit out of you so you could replenish your bank account? How much money would you take in order to do that? I don't know that you'll even see Conor McGregor walk without a limp the rest of his life, but this fight was a disgrace, and I can't believe anybody bet on it. Of course, in contrast to the World Cup, I've seen lots of bettors now demanding refunds on that fight. And I just look, if you bet on Conor McGregor before this one, it's like a fool in their money. You kind of had it coming.
And with that, we'll shift gears from the carnage of the octagon to the class of the All England Lawn Tennis Club. Top-ranked Jannik Sinner prevailed on the men's side, and 21-year-old Linda Noskova won her first major on the women's side. Adam, how was this year's Wimbledon tournament for Prime Sports and BetCris?
I mean, at the end of the day, there was still some good volume. I think it helped with the World Cup, sort of, again, filling that 24-hour cycle. Sinner just showed that he's sort of the class above these days in the tennis and coming through there. In the women's side, again, couple of Czech players in the final. I mean, if you look at the long historic run that Czech women players have had over the course of the last 30, 40 years at Wimbledon, it's been pretty strong. So all in all, solid Wimbledon, got through it pretty much unscathed. But, for the American side of the betting of it, tennis, when it comes around, US Open, which we've got coming up in another month, is usually where a lot of that volume draws. But I think with the time zone and the way that the soccer fell into this, there was actually a bit of a pickup. And oddly enough, I did see a lot more sort of engagement in those finals because, again, what's there to do on a Saturday, Sunday morning? And then you've got the, football in the afternoon on the Saturday. So I think it definitely helped with everything going on right now and people with money in their betting account.
What about the Scottish Open? Because I found myself now, it's like now there's suddenly a dearth of early morning content to watch sports wise. I'm like, hey, look, the Scottish Open. Let's Joe watching golf is that I was desperate for some sports action. What was it like for us on that one?
Well, again, the Scottish Open, it's almost becoming like the Players' Championship of, these pre-major kind of events that it gets all the top players getting over there, trying to sort of peek out their links game, get used to the long weeds and deep bunkers and that they have over there, getting ready for the Open this week. But yeah, all in all, with some good volume on the golf this week, which never happens on the European Tour, but because everyone's showing up. And I think, again, there's kind of that cycle that people have money in their betting accounts for the soccer. And it's almost like where the prediction markets and Robinhood are going these days of, I've got money in there. I can't just let it sit there and do nothing. So let me try and find something else to churn it through.
You got to roll over their IRA money, so they can't just run on 8% return a year.
Speaking of the direction prediction markets and the Robinhoods of the world are heading these days, we'll go ahead and move on from 3 marquee events generating varying degrees of betting interest this past weekend to 2 sportsbooks drawing strong interest from one prominent investor. Michael Burry, best known for correctly predicting the 2008 subprime mortgage crisis, disclosed a full-size position last week comprised of 60% in FanDuel parent company Flutter and 40% in DraftKings. His thesis, prediction markets exploit a CFTC oversight loophole to dodge state gaming taxes, and the political climate won't tolerate this. Adam, Burry bought Flutter at about $107 and DraftKings at about $26, well off their highs. What do you make of the trade, and how does the operator and you view Flutter's and DraftKings' current stock prices?
Well, I was very, very disappointed at seeing this come out because I'd said for a long period of time getting into these stocks post-World Cup, nothing to do with the prediction side of it, but the World Cup side of it. And I think these books are going to show pretty respectable profit margins on the World Cup to get into both of these stocks. So I was very disappointed. On the prediction side of how this works out, I don't know. I'm kind of 50-50 on the fence right now, whether they get closed down a little bit. And obviously, without investing in these companies, we've got skin in the game in hoping that something comes where there's a lot of, educated now liquidity that gets moved from these prediction markets back into state regulated sports books. I think he's had some good predictions in his time, but if you followed him since that, all that movie and everything come out and sort of he got a bit of notoriety, he's had some shockers as well in that time. So I think it's just sort of seeing how it plays out. He's picked his side of the fence to be on when it comes to the regulatory, if this goes to Supreme Court, stuff like that. Yes, we're seeing some sort of states chip away at some of these things, but is it really slowing it down? Not if even 50% of these numbers getting shown on their volume are even real. They're just pumping so much money through these things right now. So again, and I don't see the states really coming out at these operators or the vendors or any of these things that have sort of propping these products up either. So yeah, not the reason I would have got into them. And I was sort of looking over the next few weeks at maybe entering either or both of these things. DraftKings, one that I've more played around in and out of over time, bit of pen, some of those things. But I think it's been clear that DraftKings and FanDuel have clearly just given the middle finger to the regulators and said, we're going to play in this stuff, we're going to push forward. And this volume, whether it's actually any value or any upside onto their bottom line, the markets really aren't looking at bottom lines. They're just seeing that the money pass through, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent.
A couple quick loose ends to tie up. Flutter stock at 113.69 as we record this conversation. DraftKings at 26.55. So they're both up slightly from where Burry bought, but it seems like they popped initially and have started to settle back down a bit. I'll just state that for whatever it's worth. Joe, Burry framed this as a bet that regulators will eventually force prediction markets into the same tax and licensing framework as sportsbooks. So what impact, if any, do you think this has on the regulatory outcomes we'll see at the end of the day?
I think he's half right. I think obviously they're exploiting a loophole. There isn't a whole lot of political will, at least at the federal level where they are registered, to do anything about this right now. And so this is entirely up to the courts. It's not up to political will. I remember my wife asked me when we were challenging PASPA in the federal courts, the ban on sports betting, when she asked me, how long is this going to take? And I said, 3 years tops. 10 years later was when we were walking down the front steps of the Supreme Court after hearing oral arguments. There's a lot of people who think that this is going to be an expedient process. There doesn't seem to be anything really to indicate that it would be. There's a few more states that are obviously interested in this, but the states try to get their bag off of something that, where one side of it says, like, look, you have zero purchase on our revenue. You have zero right to be taxing us. And then they are supported by the federal government, which right now, the administration, they've said that they're standing behind the prediction markets and their way of looking at the world. And they're not going anywhere until at least 2028. And even then, the polls don't seem to indicate that there's really going to be a changeover, so that it may just be a rollover of the attitude towards prediction markets. So Burry, yeah, I get it. He did, though, make me think of something that a great bookmaker once said to me, and that was like, Joe, this business is a really quiet business. Okay. And, what he meant is like, look, you pick your side. You don't want everybody else in the world to know that. Okay. Burry being out there talking his book, like, okay, he's taking these big positions, at least for him, in FanDuel and DraftKings. Why is he out there talking his book up? Does he feel like he needs to juice it a little bit? It's really hard, I think, to get any kind of particularly retail bettor interest in going against the prevailing winds that seem to favor the prediction markets right now. If you're willing to take a long-term bet, remember, FanDuel and DraftKings are now in the prediction market business. If say this thing winds its way up to the Supreme Court, and let's say it's within the next 2 to 3 years, that's plenty of time for FanDuel and DraftKings to use the same advantages that they used in shifting from DFS to online sportsbook to become the number one and number two, sportsbooks in the country. There's nothing to say that they can't do the same thing right now. I don't see any kind of moat that Kalshi or even Polymarket, and Polymarket seems intent on just continuing to shoot itself in the foot. They're number two, but just by virtue of the fact that, like, number three, which I think is crypto.com, that doesn't seem to be mustering much of any kind of effort to gain market share. So it seems to be all Kalshi with a little bit of Polymarket, but I don't see anything that those two companies do that says they're in an unassailable lead. So, yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe after this, I'll be firing up the E-Trade account and I'll be joining Adam, trying to get in on FanDuel and DraftKings and looking for some pop post-World Cup. But, in the meantime, I think Burry is probably right on the bet, but wrong on his thesis.
We will shift gears from a star in the investing world to all-stars on the diamond. Baseball season having hit the proverbial halfway mark with the All-Star break now upon us, and the August 3rd trade deadline squarely in the sights. Adam, from tonight's Home Run Derby to tomorrow night's All-Star game to the upcoming trade deadline and its potential impact on futures markets, anything standing out from the action you're booking?
Nothing at the moment. I am noticing there's a lot of unders getting bet in this total home runs and things like this on how many home runs each of the players and that will hit. So I don't know if it has anything to do with the park, the balls, or anything of that nature, but I'm definitely seeing a bunch of under action on that. As it comes to sort of the futures and that, all those things get updated. I haven't seen anything major come in or move on that at this point. And then when it comes to the actual game on July 14th, we've got pretty even action on a slightly favorite National League at the moment, but are seeing overaction there and master overaction at the 7.5.
And Joe, as the Midsummer Classic descends upon your beloved city of Philadelphia, for the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. There's plenty of star power to appreciate as always, but also a long list of stars who have earned their stripes who will be absent, including reigning back-to-back MVPs Shohei Ohtani and Aaron Judge, Cy Young frontrunners Jacob Mizorowski and Cam Schlittler, and Philadelphia's own Zach Wheeler, who said thanks but no thanks to a sympathy invite. All things considered, what's your overall point of view on the festivities in Philadelphia over the next couple days, and what are you most anticipating for the season's second half?
So first of all those players that you just rattled off who like they're declining because they want to rest and everything like that. No, they just don't want to come there, and they do not want to hear the Philadelphia crowd get into their jerseys and into their heads. And I don't blame them. Look, I am happy as hell that, Philly is getting everything this year, from the World Cup to the All-Star game to, the 250th birthday of our country. And I love it that Christopher Sanchez, he's going to be starting in the mound for the NL. I'm really hoping that Kyle Schwarber eats everybody alive tonight in the home run derby, if only to justify the Schwarbomb sandwich at all those Wawa stores up and down the East Coast. Philadelphia is a great crowd for baseball, always has been, even when they suck. And even if it's like a Tuesday in April, they sell out the place and it's a madhouse. It's that kind of energy that this game has been lacking. And I hope that's what the Philadelphia crowd brings, because sometimes watching the All-Star game, like the last few years, I find it hard to even stay up and watch because it's so boring, frankly. There's no energy. Everybody's just kind of walking through, and I'm just hoping that my hometown can bring a little bit of competitive edginess to it that makes it just a little more fun. As far as betting on it, it's always such a crapshoot, isn't it? An All-Star game, there's no form to go on. It's basically fantasy baseball if you want to play it. I'm more interested if I'm going to be betting on something. I mean, there's no value in Kyle Schwarber tonight, and I wouldn't dare bet against him. But it would be interesting to see what props are on some of the starting or some of the pitchers that you're going to have on both sides and what they're going to be able to do.
And one more pivot this week from the pitcher's mound back to the pitch itself. Adam, we'll start with you here. France and Spain square off in the first World Cup semifinal tomorrow in Dallas, followed by Argentina and England on Wednesday in Atlanta, with France remaining the favorite to lift the cup at about plus 140, and Mbappe and Messi tied in their pursuit of the Golden Boot. Adam, where are you currently pricing both matches for the semifinal round? What's the most noteworthy action you're seeing? And then to take us home, go ahead and give us your predictions for the final matchup, the winner, and the Golden Boot winner.
Well, after having pretty much watched and gambled 100 games of World Cup soccer over the past, month, these prices look wrong to me in this semi-final. France just looked too short. England looked too short. The recreational money are on the favorites as expected. Not really any master money at this point coming in. Majority of the monies are on the overs, which I don't get. This point of time, there is so much jeopardy on these games. They're as close to they've ever been. England, one game away from, being in a final since 60 years ago. Argentina, just the slippery snake that it is, just keeps getting through every leg. I cannot believe this is not at least pick 'em, or they're not a slight favorite. We've seen, teams coming out of Miami with that humidity, just losing their legs and not having the strength in the next game. So I think whoever came out of that England-Norway game, especially after going the extra, was going to struggle here. I mean, every time Messi gets that ball on his feet, he just seems to be close to scoring or assisting, and England's defense has been pretty bloody crappy. So that one, I'm taking a strong stance on that. The other one, Spain-France, it just feels like it's too wide a margin for two teams that are pretty close. One stronger defensively, the other one attacking. At the end of the day, it's a bit like the playoffs in American sports. For the most part, defense wins championships. And I think ultimately this is where this gets through as well. So for me, I've publicly put it out there. Spain, Argentina, it's still available at 4-1 plus for these two teams to advance. That's what I'm seeing right now. But I will say I've been on more underdogs than favorites in this thing. It hasn't necessarily worked out in the knockout stages like it did in the group stages. But for me, these four teams are as evenly matched as any four teams can be with everything that we've seen through this point. I will start on the underdogs in both games. But for me, as much as I think that England-Mexico game was pivotal for them to get through, they looked pretty rough in that last game. And then the stats of teams coming out Miami and following up in their following game, sort of dumping a little bit. Out of these ones, Argentina is the biggest play for me, but I have been against him the last 3 games, so take it for what it's worth.
All right, Adam, with that, we will wish you a fast farewell for this week. And Joe, we can stay at it. I'll go ahead and weigh in with my 2 cents for whatever it's worth. Obligatory caveat, I am not a soccer fan, let alone expert, even if I attempted to play one this past Friday at the Spain-Belgium quarterfinal. But I'll go ahead and put it out there. Spain over France in penalty kicks after a 1-1 draw. England over Argentina 2-1. And then Spain over England 1-0 for the cup, with Mbappe taking home the golden boot, netting France's lone goal tomorrow. And Joe, let's get your predictions as well as what you think on us being a week removed from Team USA's elimination, and which storylines you think carry the most weight with the American audience entering the final week of the tournament.
So I can't help but think that the winner of the Spain-France tie-up is going to be your eventual World Cup champion. Kind of tough to pick between the two of them. France has a lot of offensive depth. Spain hasn't been giving up any goals. And I just like the way that they're kind of quietly sailing into the semifinals here right now, where expectations seem to have been lowered on them. I think it's because they don't have the guy up front who has like the, high wattage star power. But when you look at the 3 other teams, Messi on Argentina, Bellingham on England, and then Mbappe up front for France, obviously those guys are going to draw a lot of attention. Spain seems to be playing a better team game right now. England, I think, is the least likely to get through here right now. I think Thomas Tuchel, their manager, would probably agree with me right now, just based on what he was saying after the game the other day. They were lucky to get through against a Norway team that, frankly, really outkicked its coverage and getting to that and getting to the quarterfinals. And some would say kind of self-destructed a little bit on the field. In the end, I would like to see a Spain in the final. And I say coming out of the Argentina-England game, England might be getting all the action, but that's a bit like, and I've said this in the past, it's like Notre Dame gets all the action regardless of who they play, just because they have the biggest following. England probably has the biggest following of the teams that are left in this. So that's, I think it's definitely skewed the odds. I see Argentina getting through in that game, even if Gianni Infantino has to come down and red card half the England side himself in order to accomplish it. And if it gets to that point, then I don't know. And does narrative trump defensive quality? And it would be the matchup I'd want to see, the Spain's defensive blanket cover Messi in that final. It would definitely be one for the ages.
I will, I guess, note that it sounds like Spain has won the hearts of prime suspects, knowing that France is the tournament favorite, and all 3 of us are on Spain's side as far as the rest of this tournament goes. But to dig in just a bit deeper on some handicapping nuances for each of these games, one thing Adam touched on, England coming off of a matchup in Miami where the heat and humidity might be taxing looking forward. Also, not long before that, their previous match against Mexico in Mexico City, they dealt with not only the elevation, but defending for their lives, a man down for more than half an hour. So it's fair to wonder how much they've got left in the tank at this point. And then similarly with Spain-France, I found it an interesting quirk in the schedule that France gets the extra day of rest heading into this matchup. How much do those handicapping intricacies play into this at all for you at this stage of the tournament?
Well, actually, if you consider the England one, of the teams that got to the semifinals, you can say that they may be the one who's had their character built the most. Because, they got the first win at the Azteca Stadium in 13 years. Mexico hasn't lost at the Azteca to anybody in 13 years. So to get that win there, that's pretty impressive. I laugh at what they were saying about the Miami conditions. It was 90 degrees with 80% humidity, which isn't even as hot and as humid as it is here in the Washington, D.C. area for the last week or so, where it's been in the hundreds with 90 plus humidity. So for me, I would trade that in a second. Stop being pussies. Who knows? Right now, none of the teams that are currently in this one are particularly favored by the conditions. But remember, they're going to be playing the final eventually in, New York, New Jersey Stadium, otherwise known as MetLife Stadium. So that's not exactly a boiling cauldron. They are going to have plenty of time to recover in between. Does France get a leg up by having an extra day on rest? Yeah, maybe. But at this point, the staffs, the athletic training staffs for these teams are so great. They usually have their people fully recovered like within 48 hours. I think it's more of a mental thing than anything else. And honestly, would you want an extra day of sitting around dwelling on this, or would you want to get right back at it? If I was England, I'd want to get right back at it, even though those guys probably have the lesser of all the teams in the Final Four. I think they have on paper the least claim to being the World Cup champion here. But they've been through a lot tougher ride than those other guys. I mean, you can argue that they got some help from a video cable, but other than that, it's they've had to gut it out. And they're that interview with BBC that Tuchel did after the game, you can see that their coach is under no goddamn illusions when it comes to that. So if he does a good job of evangelizing that in the locker room, maybe they turn that to their advantage. The other teams, they're just too slick. But you know what? An additional day to think about being in the World Cup final. Yeah, that's tough. I would want to get right back at it.
For now, I think this has been a loaded episode. We've done about all we can up to this point, so we'll go ahead and call it a wrap. To the audience, thanks as always for tuning in. Enjoy the culmination of the World Cup, and we'll catch you next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Prime Suspects. Register for Prime Sports at primesports.com and download the Prime Sports app. You can follow us on Twitter at @PrimeSuspects_, at Joe Brennan Jr., and at Adam Bjorn. You must be 21 or over to play on Prime Sports. Always bet responsibly and within your limits. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER.